Captain James Reed had survived 3 years of deep space exploration without incident. His record remained spotless until the day his shuttle malfunctioned over the planet, Velara Prime. The emergency landing tore through his ship's hull, scattering debris across a crystalline forest. James crawled from the wreckage, bleeding from a gash above his eye. He pressed his hand against the wound, stumbling forward through the strange vegetation that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. That was when he heard the scream. James ran toward the sound, his training overriding his pain. He found her lying beneath a collapsed transport vehicle, her leg trapped under twisted metal. She was unlike any being he had encountered. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality, shifting between silver and pale blue. 4 arms struggled against the wreckage, and her large eyes reflected the forest's glow like polished mirrors. Blood seeped from her trapped leg. The color was darker than human blood, almost purple. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed the metal frame and pulled with everything he had. The structure shifted slightly. The woman cried out in her own language, words flowing like musical notes. James repositioned himself and pulled again, his muscles screaming in protest. The metal gave way. The woman dragged herself free, her face contorted in agony. James immediately tore strips from his uniform jacket, kneeling beside her. He wrapped the makeshift bandage around her injured leg, pulling it tight to stop the bleeding. She watched him with those mirror-like eyes, her breathing rapid and shallow. James tied off the bandage and sat back, his own vision swimming from blood loss and exhaustion. The woman reached out with one of her upper hands. Her fingers, long and delicate, touched his wounded forehead. She spoke again in that musical language, her tone gentle despite her obvious pain. James managed a weak smile. He took her hand in his, squeezing gently to let her know he understood she was grateful. That was his first mistake. The woman's eyes widened. She said something urgent, almost panicked. James frowned, not understanding. He simply held her hand, trying to offer comfort. Her 3 other hands moved in complex gestures. She repeated the same phrase over and over, growing more insistent. James nodded, assuming she was expressing thanks or asking for help. He squeezed her hand again. She stopped talking. Her expression shifted to something between shock and resignation. Within minutes, the forest filled with hovering vehicles. Soldiers in gleaming armor descended, weapons drawn. James raised his hands, releasing the woman's hand. The soldiers surrounded them, shouting commands in that musical language. An older male with elaborate markings on his face pushed through the soldiers. He looked at the woman, then at James, then back at the woman. His face transformed through several expressions before settling on barely controlled fury. The woman spoke quickly, gesturing with her free arms toward James and her bandaged leg. The older male listened, his jaw clenched. He snapped orders at the soldiers, who immediately lowered their weapons. James and the woman were lifted onto separate medical platforms and transported to a massive structure that rose from the forest canopy like a crown of crystal and light. Inside, medical personnel swarmed around them. James tried to explain he was human, that his biology might be different, but they worked with surprising knowledge of his physiology. Hours later, cleaned and bandaged, James was escorted to an enormous hall. The woman sat on an elevated platform, her leg now properly treated and immobilized. She wore ceremonial robes that sparkled like starlight. The older male stood beside her, along with several other elaborately dressed individuals. A translator device was pressed into James's hand. When the older male spoke, words formed in James's mind. "Human, you have performed the binding ritual with Princess Lyra of House Valen. Do you understand what this means?" James's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I was just helping her." The older male's expression hardened. You rendered aid to a member of the royal bloodline. You shed blood in her presence. You took her primary hand in yours and sealed the oath with repeated affirmation. By our oldest laws, you are now bound to her as her sworn partner. I didn't know, James stammered. I'm from Earth. We don't have these customs. I was just trying to help someone who was hurt. Princess Lyra spoke, her voice translated through the device. He speaks truth, Father. He came from a crashed vessel. He saved my life without knowledge of our ways. The binding was my error for not explaining before he completed the ritual. The king turned to his daughter. Error or not, the binding is complete. It cannot be undone. Our people witnessed it. The law is absolute. James felt the room spinning. So what does this mean exactly? It means, the king said coldly, that you are now the sworn partner of the crown princess. You will live among us. You will learn our ways. You will be bound to her fate until death separates you. James looked at Lyra. She met his gaze, her mirror-like eyes reflecting his own stunned expression. She spoke again. If you wish, I will petition for your freedom. It may take years, and it will bring shame to my house, but I will not force this upon someone who saved my life out of pure kindness. James thought about his ship, destroyed beyond repair. He thought about his mission, already failed. He thought about Earth, 3 years away at best. He looked at this woman who was now apparently his wife by alien law, someone he had helped without a second thought. No, he said quietly, I won't bring shame to you for my ignorance. If this is the law, then I'll honor it. The king's expression shifted slightly. You accept the binding willingly? I accept the consequences of my actions, James replied, even if I didn't understand them at the time. Over the following weeks, James learned the language, the customs, the history of Velara Prime. He discovered that the binding ritual had ancient roots in battlefield medicine, where warriors who saved each other's lives became permanent allies. Over centuries, it had evolved into a form of marriage among the nobility. Lyra was patient with him, teaching him their ways with good humor, despite the awkwardness of their situation. She explained that Velarans believed the greatest bond formed between those who met during moments of vulnerability and chose compassion over self-preservation. You could have hidden when you heard me scream, she told him during one lesson. Your ship was destroyed. You were injured. You had every reason to preserve your own strength. Instead, you ran toward danger to help a stranger. That is why the binding holds such power for my people. James found himself growing to respect her. She was intelligent, strategic, and surprisingly witty. She had been traveling to mediate a dispute between 2 territorial houses when her transport was sabotaged. Her injury could have been fatal without intervention. You really would have died if I hadn't helped. James asked. The hemorrhaging would have continued, Lyra confirmed. I would have lost consciousness within minutes and bled out shortly after. You saved my life, James Reed of Earth. 3 months after the crash, James stood beside Lyra during a formal ceremony that recognized their binding before the entire kingdom. He wore Velaron's ceremonial armor, adapted to his human form. She stood without support, her leg fully healed. As they received the blessing of the assembled houses, James reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He had set out to explore the stars and catalog alien species. Instead, he had become part of an alien royal family through a cultural misunderstanding. Later, during the celebration, Lyra found him standing on a balcony overlooking the crystalline forest. Do you regret it? She asked. The choice to honor the binding? James considered the question carefully. I regret that I didn't know what I was doing, but I don't regret helping you, and I don't regret staying. She moved to stand beside him, her 4 arms folded in a gesture he now recognized as contentment. "My people have a saying," she told him. "The greatest journeys begin with accidental steps." Perhaps this was meant to be. James smiled. Humanity has a similar saying. We say things happen for a reason. Then perhaps our peoples are not so different after all. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the forest glow beneath the light of Valara Prime's 3 moons. James knew his life had changed forever the moment he heard that scream in the forest. He had responded with instinct and compassion, never imagining it would lead him here. But looking at the kingdom spread before him, at the woman beside him who had become his partner through the strangest circumstances imaginable, James found he could accept this new path. He had come to the stars seeking discovery. He had found something far more unexpected, a home among the stars, built on a foundation of accidental honor and mutual respect. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them as he had faced that moment in the forest, with courage, compassion, and an open heart.